It's now the start of September in Melbourne, which means swarming season for bees. Hello, I'm Ashton, the Australian Gardening Queen. It's a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne and I'm here with my beautiful bees. They're very busy today. It's now swarming season here in Melbourne, which is basically what bees do in nature. When the colony is overpopulated and they've run out of room, the queen will lay some royal eggs. They will be crowned the new queen. The new queen will stay with the hive and the old queen will actually take half the worker bees with her, separate and start a new colony or hive somewhere else. This is what swarming looks like. The bees are disoriented. They're trying to locate where the queen has landed. The queen will find a nice little spot and half the colony will follow her. If you're lucky, it'll end up somewhere like this. Easy to grab. If you're unlucky, you can end up with a swarm in an awkward little spot like this, which unfortunately does require an exterminator with a little vacuum. This hive is about 3 years old at the end of this year, actually. The first year, I just let the bees settle in, and at the time we had floods in Melbourne. As a result of the floods, plants were producing flowers, but they weren't producing nectar, and bees obviously rely on that nectar source, same as most insects, right? They need that for their honey. So as a result, a lot of my beekeeping friends actually lost their hives. There wasn't enough food source, so they hit the road and found new homes. Mine, however, were doing extremely well. I hope it was because I planted 1,000 flowers. I worked really hard that year at making sure that I had heaps of bee-attracting flowers and butterfly-attracting flowers. Here is some throwback footage to that GoPro era. So as you can see, I've got a lot of worker bees on this frame. Because they're covering such a huge proportion of the frame, that would usually indicate good population, a strong colony, and active brood rearing. So you can see on the right, those little bubbles there, that's capped brood. Put the next box on 2022, Ashton. But they thrived. They did really well. And as a new beekeeper, thank goodness I was with my beekeeping club, because the president, Mick, was amazing, talking me through the panic I had when I walked outside and the bees were everywhere, and then they swarmed, and luckily they went on my neighbour's roof, and he said, just take a breath, we're going to work through this, just get a box and you're going to catch them. I thought, wow, what are you talking about? I'm not going to be able to catch them, but I did. And it was the best way to learn, actually, really hands-on learning. So we're back to this footage. This is the live 2022 cluster. Queen swarmed on the neighbour's roof. So I do as the president says. I get a ladder, I get a cardboard box with a lid, and I was lucky that I had my Ben's Bee nuke box still in the shed. So I just climbed the ladder, had my glove on, and I gently sweeped them into that cardboard box. And because I got them within the first 20 minutes of them swarming, they were very gentle and docile, and they were just quite happy to go in the nuke box and be with their queen bee. So learning from that mistake, we obviously as beekeepers want to prevent swarming, because it weakens your colony. My colony here has really struggled compared to the original queen who I had to catch off the roof. I then put in a traditional hive. They are doing so well. They're a strong colony, a lot of honey from that hive, and a lot more bees, a lot more babies. This colony is beautiful, and she's getting there. I've made sure that when it is swarming season in Melbourne, I do make sure I put the next box on. I make sure that there's no queen cells in there. This is what a queen cell will look like, a big peanut. You need to remove this to prevent swarming. If you do find one, you can use it on a weaker hive, or you can give it to someone at your bee club, as people like to requeen every few years, depending on how their colony is doing. So as you can see with this particular hive, I've got 2 brood boxes. So you've got a brood box and a super box. Brood box is the bees with their eggs. You've got worker bee eggs, and you've got queen cells if they're about to swarm. You've also then got a super box, which I'm going to put on today. That will prevent the swarming, give them more room. The super is also where you keep all your honey, and that's their food. Traditionally, you would pack it down to one box. However, this year I wasn't able to because they did such an incredible job with all the comb, and I just thought it looked so beautiful. There was no way known without raking their hard work I would have been able to condense them to one box. And I think it's really important to maintain their work. They've worked really hard at it, and they're really happy, so I'm happy. So over winter, you take the super off, you put some frames, enough frames for them to live over the winter period. They go into like a hibernation process. There's a really cool video online. Let's put the link in the comments below, where the bees actually huddle together and radiate heat to keep warm. They actually kick out a lot of the male worker bees because they're trying to condense their habitat, and they want to make sure that they have enough food for their children. So they do actually kick out some of the men, and they can either go off and find a new colony, or a lot of the time I find them at the bottom of the hive, which is really daunting. When I was a new beekeeper and there's all these bees, I kept picking them up, putting them back in the hive, and the women kept kicking them out again. So traditionally in beekeeping, you would condense the hive down to just one brood box. You wouldn't leave on two. However, my bees did such an incredible job with the honeycomb, with the brood. I didn't want to interrupt any of the natural rhythm that they had built, and they worked really hard on, so I didn't want to damage anything. So I left two on this year, and they seem to be happy, so I'm happy. So today I'm basically going to just be putting the super on top, preventing swarming. I'll open up the hive and make sure that the queen's happy, that we've got healthy cells, happy brood, little babies in there inside the hive, and we'll see if they need any maintenance, or they need me to put in some more frames of honey or tend to any of their other needs. So the tools we're going to use today, I've got my very important hive tool. So this is to scoop up frames without disturbing the bees. We've got this in case we need to clean up the lid or anything. I probably won't use this, but this is basically if we just need to see those cells or check anything, we can gently move the bee aside without hurting him. We're going to also use a queen excluder, which will basically put in between the brood box and the super to stop the queen laying eggs in the honey. So for the flow hive, we're going to be using this super box, which is really cool. You can undo this, but I can't on that angle. I'll show you after. It's got windows so you can see inside. And I'm going to attempt, after 3 years of no success, I'm going to attempt to use these again. We'll see how we go. I think the issue is you might be better off just having two brood boxes. Instead of having two brood boxes, have one, because mine just don't seem really that interested in building in this one. They keep building in the middle, but I've spent so much money on this that it would be foolish not to continue going. So we're going to do that one. And then for our traditional hive, I'm just going to use traditional beeswax frames. And also I'm going to use, this is a creation by John Edmonds, where you can just pop out kind of like a CD, so you get just the honeycomb as well, so you won't have to spin it. I just thought that was a really cool invention to try. And of course, the smoker, which simulates a fire. This makes the bees relax their pheromones and just be a bit more calm, because you're opening up their home. They might not be ready for a get-together, so that just relaxes them so we don't stress them out and they're happy. You need to make sure that when you're using one of these smokers, you don't burn anything with colour on it, don't do newspaper. You want to stick to healthy stuff like pine needles. Bees are very sensitive to smell, so it's extremely important to make sure that you're not wearing any perfume. Don't shower gel beforehand. Maybe have a shower beforehand and just water. They're very sensitive to smell and loud noises, so maybe keep it down as well. I'm also obviously going to wear my bee suit and probably take off my hat that I got from one of the colonies at the Melbourne show this year.
Use the smoker, and we're going to use some torn up cardboard, some rosemary, and some dried pine needles and leaves I collected while working on another YouTube program. This will be really good because it won't interfere with the bees' senses. Don't use coloured paper, please. I like to use this Bic lighter. It's got a large end, which the neck means you don't risk burning your fingers, but you can also use your standard smoker lighter. So I'm starting by tearing up some cardboard, and then I'm going to use my Bic lighter to light the cardboard. Have a look at that. So you'll notice here I'm giving a couple of puffs to the side of the smoker, and this basically just gives it a little bit of air, gets the cardboard burning nicely. Put it back down, and we're going to put some pine needles and dried leaves in. Again, puff, puff, pass. Okay, let's finish this up. I'm going to use the rosemary just to push it down the kindling and put some more pine needles and dried leaves. Give it another couple of puffs, and we are ready to go. Watch how quickly I do this. Puff, 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 puff. And that's basically just making sure the bees are really relaxed. Opening up the hive here. The first box looked great. There was a bit of burr comb in a gap, so I will need to remove that. However, the rest of the brood looks good. No queen cells that I chucked on this other box. Unfortunately, my camera died, so that's why it sort of went from one part to the other. And then I went over and I did puff, puff at the other hive. And we're back in the future. It's November now. The bees are very happy. Like if you enjoyed this video. Comment if you have any questions or I missed something out. And make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see more.